Do you know a single function that can be used to split text in one cell into multiple rows or columns, or sort text alphabetically in a cell? Also append multiple tables together in one single list, or extract any word from a string with a drop list. It can also convert multiple lines in a cell into multiple rows. It's the amazing and little known FILTERXML function that can do all that and much more. The FILTERXML is used to store and transport data and require the data to be stored in a specific structured way with opening and closing tags. Here is how we build the structure of the FILTERXML syntax. A way of any complexity, if your data is in a cell, range, or a table, and you want to store it in a FILTERXML, think of this data as if you are exploring a house. The first thing you do is opening the main door of the house. You then open each room and close it. And the last thing is closing the main door. This is exactly the structure of the XML tags needed to store the data. For simplicity, I will use the symbols M to represent the main door and R to represent the rooms. Any other symbol can be used. A tag is in a set of angular brackets like this. A closing tag also has a /. Let's apply that concept of exploring a house. Open the house main door, then open a room, close the room, open the next room, close it, and keep doing this until finally you close the main door of the house. Rooms represent the different elements of your data. If you look closely to the pattern, there is a closing and opening tag repeated all the way, beside 2 opening tags at the beginning and 2 closing tags at the end. Once you store the elements of your data in the structured format, you need to tell the FILTERXML where would you like to break these elements. That's called the X path. I want to break at each element or room. Now let's apply this concept in Excel. I am Nabil Murad. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the FILTERXML function. So let's dive in. Here is my start file. You can download the exercise file and follow along by clicking on the link below this video. In this tutorial, I'll show you multiple examples for using the FILTERXML function. In this worksheet, I have in each cell in column A multiple values separated by commas. I want to split the contents of each column at the position of each comma. Of course, I could go to the Data tab and use the text to column, but that's static, it's not dynamic. I can also use Power Query, but in this tutorial, we are focusing on the functionality of the FILTERXML function. And to create the FILTERXML function, I have to build the model that I showed you in my introduction, thinking of each cell at the main house and thinking of each value as a room. Then I'm going to build the structure of the FILTERXML following that pattern. I'm going to do that in cell C1, and I would like to replace each comma by the closing and the opening tag. And I do that by using a substitute function, equal substitute. Where is the text you want to substitute? I want to substitute the text in cell A1, and then I hit comma. What's the old text? It's the comma, double quote, comma, double quote, and then the next argument, what's the new text? Well, the new text will be the closing and the opening tag, the closing of the room, the opening of the next room. I type it in double quotes, angular bracket, / room, close the angular bracket, open the next room, R, and close the angular bracket in double quotation. When I close the bracket and have a look, then I replaced every occurrence of a comma by the closing and the opening tag. To complete the pattern of the FILTERXML structure, then I need two opening tags at the beginning and two closing tags at the end, and I do that by using the joining operator Shift-7 on your keyboard. I put my function in the edit mode, F2, and before the substitute function, I'll be writing the opening tag. I want to open the house, so in double quotes, angular bracket, I want to open the main door, and then I close the angular bracket. Then I want to open the room, angular bracket R, close the angular bracket and double quote, then Shift-7 to join it to the substitute function. At the end, I need two closing tags, so I click at the end of my function. I type a joining operator Shift-7 in double quotation. I want to close the last room, then angular bracket /R, angular bracket, and then I want to close the main door of the house, angular bracket /M, angular bracket, double quotation, and I would have created the pattern. All what I did so far is the first argument of the XML path. So to make it easier for you to understand, I'm going to cut it, Control X to cut it, and then I'll be creating my FILTERXML function. I type FILTERXML. The first argument is the XML structure, then I paste what I created. And then I type a comma, the XPath, which is the second argument of the FILTERXML. Where do you want to break? I want to break at each value in each cell. I want to break at each room. Then in double quotes, I type two /R to break at each room. I close the double quote, and then I close the bracket for the FILTERXML function. I hit enter. Each value in cell A1 appears on a different row in column C. I want to copy this function. I select C1, I put it in the edit mode. I'm going to copy this function because I'll use the same exact function in my next example, Control C. And before the FILTERXML, I want to switch this single column into multiple columns by switching the rows into columns. That's the perfect job of the transpose function. So I type transpose, I hit the tab key, I close the bracket for the transpose function, and when I hit enter, I would have split the contents of cell A1 into multiple columns at the occurrence of each delimiter, which was a comma. I created my function in cell C1, and if you look at the other cells, then you see the function grayed out because the function lives only in cell C1 and it spills to the adjacent cells. I'm going to copy my function all the way down to split all the cells in column A, and when I release, I don't want to copy the formatting, so I click on this little options tag and select fill without formatting, and I was able to split the multiple values in each cell in column A into multiple columns. In my next example, I have in column A multiple values in each cell. These values are separated by commas. I just want to sort them alphabetically and keep all the values in one single cell as they are. So I'm going to use a FILTERXML function to do that. I'm selecting cell C1 and I want to paste the FILTERXML function, the same exact function I created for the previous example of splitting a single cell into multiple columns. So I type an equal sign and I paste, and when I hit enter, I get the multiple values into multiple rows in column C. Now I want to sort these values. So I select the first function in cell C1 and I wrap it in a sort function. It's a dynamic array function. Then I type sort and then I hit tab. I close the bracket for the sort function and I hit enter. Now I have the values sorted alphabetically in one single column. The next step will be putting all the values together in one single cell, separating them by commas, and that's the perfect job of the text join function. So I select my function, I put it in the edit mode one more time, and I want to wrap it in a text join function. Note, the FILTERXML is storing the values. It's transporting the values to the sort, and it's transporting the values to the text join function. So I type text join, I hit the tab key. What's your delimiter? My delimiter will be a comma, so double quote, comma, double quote, and then I type comma to move to the next argument. I want to ignore empty cells, which is true. I type 1, and then I type comma. The last argument of the text join function will be the bunch of functions I created first, which is the sort and the FILTERXML function. I need to go to the end and close the bracket for the text join function, and then hit enter. Now I can copy this function all the way down, and all the values in column A are now in column C, sorted alphabetically in one single cell. In the next example, I have 3 tables. Each table represents a class. So I have class 1, class 2, class 3. In each class, I have a list of student names and their score in multiple subjects. What I would like to do is to append the records from the 3 tables all together in one single list in column V. So the concept is simple. I want to store all the records coming from the 3 tables combined together in a FILTERXML function. The FILTERXML stores and transports. Using the concept of the house and the rooms, the 3 tables combined together will represent the house, and each individual cell in each individual table will represent a room. In preparation for combining the 3 tables, I would like to count how many rows do I have in all the tables combined together. Then I'm going to use a sum function. So in cell T3, I type equal sum, and then I hit tab. What would you like to sum? I want to sum the rows, and then I hit tab. I name the tables class 1, class 2, class 3. So I select class 1, and then I close the bracket for the first rows function. I type a comma, another rows function, and I hit tab. This time it will count the rows in class 2, and then I close the bracket, comma. I want to add also the rows in class number 3, so I select it and I close the bracket, and that will be my function. I want to close the bracket for the sum function. When I hit enter, I get the total number of rows in the 3 classes. I'm doing this because I want to make it dynamic, so whenever I add more records or I delete records, everything will be dynamic. I also want to count the maximum number of columns, although they are exactly the same, but I'm going to use a max function to return the maximum number of columns in case they are not identical. I'll be typing equal max. I want the maximum number of columns. I use a columns function. Columns of class number 1. I close the bracket and then comma. I want the columns of class number 2. I close the bracket and the columns of class number 3. I select it by clicking in the upper left corner, and I close the bracket for class 3. I close the bracket for the max function, and I hit enter. The maximum number of columns is 5. Now if we look at the different tables, the first cell in the first row in the first table, that will be the first value stored in the FILTERXML function. Then this is the second value, the third value, the fourth, the fifth, and then I move to the next row, 6, 7, 8, and so on until I reach the last row. That will be value number 75 stored in the FILTERXML, and then I continue counting 76, 78, 79, and I want to show you the numbers in the next sheet just to demonstrate the order of storing the individual cells in the FILTERXML function. So if I go to the next worksheet, this is the order at which the FILTERXML function will be storing the different values. My goal is to append the 3 tables together. Then I want to put the first table, and then below it I want the second table, the green one, and then below it I want the orange table, and I want everything to be dynamic. Then I wish to create a sequence of numbers from 1 down to 245 in 5 columns, and then the total number of rows will be the sum of rows of the 3 tables. I'll go back to my previous worksheet. That's the perfect job of a sequence function. So if I type equal sequence and I hit tab, how many rows you want? I want the total number of rows of the 3 tables, and this is what I calculated in cell T3. and then I type a comma. How many columns you want? I want the maximum number of columns, and this is what I calculated in T4. And then I want to start at 1. I hit comma and type 1, and I want a step of 1. Then I hit comma and type 1 and close the bracket for the sequence function. Look at the sequence function, what it will be doing. When I hit enter, it gives me exactly the sequence of numbers I'm looking for. I'll be storing the sequence function in the Office clipboard to use it after building the structure of the FILTERXML. So I'm going to put my function in the edit mode F2, and then I copy this entire function, the sequence function, and then I hit Control and double click on letter C to open the Office clipboard, and I copied the sequence function. To keep some room, I'm going to close the Office clipboard for now, hit Escape, and delete my sequence function, and I'll start building the structure of the FILTERXML. Inside the FILTERXML, all the individual values will be stored separated by semicolons, which means when I hit enter to test the FILTERXML, each value will appear in a separate row. Let's build the structure. I want to combine the three tables and separate them by the tags, and I'll be using a text join function to do that. Equal text join. Remember, the text join function has a limit to the number of characters it can store, and the limit is 32,767. That's, by the way, the cell limit. So the first argument of the text join function, what's your delimiter? I want to close the room, open the next room. Then in double quotation, I type an opening angular bracket / R, close the angular bracket, open an angular bracket, I close the first room, I want to open the next room, angular bracket and double quotes. And then I hit comma. Here, would you like to ignore empty cells? You know, if I have an empty cell in any one of these tables and I ignore it, I'll be messing up all the tables when I append them together. Then, in this case, I want to include empty cell in case they exist. Then I type a 0, and then I type a comma. The last argument of the FILTERXML are the three tables that I want to combine. Then I select class 1 by hovering over the upper left corner, and then I hit comma. I select class 2, I hit comma. I select class 3, and I close the bracket for the text join function. Now if I hit enter, this is what it returns. Look at this. Each individual value is separated from the next value with a closing tag and an opening tag. But remember, the FILTERXML requires opening the main door, opening the first room at the beginning, and two closing tags at the end. I want to close the last room and close the main door. So let's add these by using an ampersand joining operator of Excel. I put my function in the edit mode, I hit F2, and before the text join, I'll be typing in double quote, opening angular bracket, M, close the angular bracket, open angular bracket, R, close the angular bracket, double quote, and ampersand shift 7 on my keyboard. I want to do the same at the end. Then I click at the end of my function. And here I'll be using another joining operator, and I want to close the last room in double quote, open angular bracket / R, close the angular bracket, and I want to close the main door of the house, open angular bracket / M, close the angular bracket, and close the double quotation, and that will be the structure of the FILTERXML function. Now I want to put all that in a FILTERXML function. Then I click after the equal sign and I type FILTERXML. All what I created so far is the first argument of the FILTERXML. So if I type FILTERXML and then I hit tab, that was the first argument. I click at the end and then I type a comma. Here the FILTERXML is asking for the XPath. Where do you want to break? I want to break at each value. I want to break at each cell. I want to break at each room. So in double quote, I type 2 / R and then double quote and close the bracket for the FILTERXML. I want to test my FILTERXML function to see what it is storing before hitting enter. So I select the function and hit the F9 key. And here is what the function is storing. It's storing all the values in an array, starting and ending with curly brackets, where the values are separated by semicolon, which means they are on different rows, but in one single column. I'm going to hit Ctrl Z to undo, and when I hit enter, I get one single column, and each value coming from the different tables is on a different row. And because the FILTERXML function is used to store and transport data, I'm storing all these values into the FILTERXML, but I want to transport it to an index function so that the index function will enable me to combine them all together, which will result in appending the three tables into one. So I'm going to save this FILTERXML function in the Office clipboard along with the sequence function that I created earlier. These are the two arguments required for the index function. So let's copy the FILTERXML, Ctrl C. I'm saving it to the Office clipboard. I hit escape and then hit delete and start over again, creating my index function. Equal index. And then I hit tab. What's the first argument? What's the array from which we'll be returning values? It will be the FILTERXML function with everything it's storing. So I paste Ctrl V. And then I hit comma. I want to move to the next argument of the index function. What's the row number? This is exactly why I created the sequence function that I explained before. Then I'm going to get this function. It's already stored in the Office clipboard. I click on sequence to insert it. Let's close the Office clipboard. And now I need to close the bracket for the index function. When I hit enter, I would have combined the three tables together. Here at the top, that's the first record from the first table. Let's have a look by scrolling a little bit to the left. This is the first record of the first table. I see the list of records from table 1 until Ramirez, the last record. And then we continue with the first record from the second table. I would like to test how dynamic it is by bringing more records to the first table. So if I scroll down, I can cut these two records, Ctrl X, and I'll be pasting them to the bottom of the first table. This is the last record of the first table, but the moment I paste two records, they have been included automatically in the result of the index function. Then everything is dynamic thanks to the FILTERXML function that stores and transports data. In my next example, I have in column B some text. The number of words in each cell is different, and I counted these words by using a len and the substitute function. You can learn how I did that by watching my tutorial in which I combined the len and substitute and the lambda function. The link is in the description below this video. What I would like to do is to use the FILTERXML function to extract a specific word with a drop list. So if I want to extract the second word, then I click on the drop list, I select 2, and automatically I get the second word. I can make it 4, and everything is dynamic. You can learn how I did that by exploring the FILTERXML function I created in column C. In my next example, I have a setup which shows a category, an item, and an amount. And you might have noticed that for the item and the amount, I have multiple lines in each single cell. I would like to separate these lines into separate rows so that each record is on a different row. I explained in a previous tutorial how I do that by using Power Query. You can watch the tutorial by clicking on the link in the description below this video. In this tutorial, I convert the multiple lines into multiple rows by using a FILTERXML function. You can check my solution in the exercise file. And if you enjoyed this training video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel to be notified when new tutorials are released. The best is yet to come. Thanks for watching and see you next time.